What's up, gang? Thanks for joining the Undiplomatic Podcast, the show with undiplomatic takes about the foreign policy scene. I'm your host, Van Jackson. And, when I can get me, Matt Duss, Julia Gledhill all together, we do our variety episodes. I love them. Everybody seems to love them. They often have the highest download numbers, but we only do them once every couple weeks. And it's actually a bitch to line up all three of our schedules, so it's hard to do it even more regularly than that. And as you know, the world is a dumpster fire right now. For my own sanity, and also maybe for your sanity, we need more critical takes about current events. There's too much happening in the world. It's very hard to keep track of all the shit that matters right now. And there's part of me that actually literally wants kind of a historical record of what is it we're focusing on amid all this crazy shit, right? But the bottom line is we need more checking in about what's happening in the world, in U.S. foreign policy and U.S. politics and all of that. So on weeks when we don't have a variety episode, I'm experimenting here with checking in on the dumpster fire that is our world with episodes like this. And so I think we've talked about this before, but like technically the Undiplomatic newsletter and the Undiplomatic podcast are like separate offerings. Like the vibes are the same. The origin story is similar, of course. And I'm a constant in both, I guess. But I'm doing this dumpster fire thing first and foremost for patrons of the newsletter, because I ran a poll on the newsletter, and this is they asked for more content like this, so I feel like I have to give it to them. And so as soon as I record this, it's going to go out to those supporters, that tribe, and then within a day or two delay, I don't know, we'll play with the timing, then I'll release this same audio and video to Undiplomatic podcast listeners, free to all. So if you cannot afford the newsletter, or if you have not adapted to the culture of paying for good information, then everybody will get the hot takes eventually for free, but they will just be like freshest and fastest for patrons of the newsletter. So with that, surveying the dumpster fire, that is what's going on. I've got 3 stories to share, and the first, this is fun, I guess, or it's fascinating, I should say. So there's this publication called Rest of World. I really like it. They've got a piece called the U.S. Chinese immigrants running Temu centers from their homes. And Temu is, of course, this giant Chinese e-commerce company. It's like Amazon, but in Asia and in New Zealand, actually. It's way bigger than Amazon. It's like the main place you get your shit. So like the quality of the stuff I've gotten from Temu is like, meh. Not great, honestly. It is what it is. But Temu is not the story here, right? What's mind-blowing about this story is the intersection of great power rivalry with the gigification, not just of the economy, man, of supply chains specifically. So the piece starts out in Eason Lin's cramped one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn Sunset Park. The living room is a maze of hundreds of boxes. All of the packages will soon ship out to Americans who shop on Temu and TikTok Shop. When Lin heard the logistics industry was thriving, he saw an opportunity. He turned his small living room into a makeshift warehouse, offering order fulfillment services to sellers in Shenzhen, China's e-commerce hub. It's a comfortable job, says Lin, who wakes up each morning to check orders, print shipping labels, and pack items. He transports packages on foot, either in a backpack or on a trolley to a nearby post office, since he doesn't own a car. For every package he processes, he charges Chinese sellers about $1. So it goes on from there. But like this little case study is super illuminating, right? Chinese immigrants in America, not just Chinese immigrants, but in this case, Chinese immigrants, turning their living rooms into mini fulfillment centers. In an evil capitalist sort of way, this is brilliant. But just like, driving Uber is no way to make a living, it's either a side hustle or a job of desperation. So too, we can say that there's no, this can't be more than like a side hustle. it's hard to see how you make a living from this, and in the piece they say, where is it? Let me find it here. Sorry. Quote, Lin said the money he made from his warehouse business is not even enough to cover his $950 rent. There you go. See, but he hopes to profit when volume picks up. He is now looking to run a warehouse of about 2,000 to 4,000 square feet. Some of his potential clients sell auto parts and furniture, Lin said, and there's no way his Brooklyn living room can handle those goods. No shit. So there you go. This guy's on a hamster wheel, and what he's capitalizing on is actually the US cracking down on cheap imports from China, right? So the piece says that Chinese exporters are storing inventory in America to do drop shipping and order fulfillment and all that. But instead of using big mega warehouse companies, they just find people who want to use their living room. And it's what's super important for context here is that like there's a like China US trade, in spite of decoupling and containment and these trends, these larger trends that define the relationship, there's still tons of like everyday transactions in Sino US relations. So like Temu's gross merchandise value in just the second quarter of 2024, one quarter, was $12 billion, bro. And the US share of that 12 billion in that one quarter of 2024, fucking 45% of revenues, dude. So this is big business. There's a lot of money to be had, but that money is, of course, being hoarded by owners of capital, which in this case is the e-commerce companies. And then these mom and pop fulfillment centers are using their house, but they can't make enough to pay the rent on these houses. So it's there like so many things. This is kind of a scam. It's brilliant and yet a scam at the same time. It's like this can't last. But as always, I'm thinking about this from like a working class perspective. Workers are kind of fucking themselves, and that's been the case with the gig economy. But you do it because what choice do you have? Like if you're desperate, you do it. And the from the worker perspective, the strategic opportunity that I see in this is that like supply chains are choke points. If you occupy a choke point, it gives you something to leverage. And so if these mom and pop fulfillment centers can unionize and maybe clean up the industry so that there are standards and transparency and all that for these like micro fulfillment things, then this transformation of global supply chains, this further decentralization of supply chains, that can actually give workers power and economic security, right? But if they don't form some kind of union or guild or whatever, this is fucked. And then before I get off this story quickly, the great power rivalry angle on all of this, the piece offered up that cracking down on Chinese exports to America actually increases demand for these storage and warehouse sites to spring up locally in America as a way around tariffs, right? It's actually a cost saving measure. And the e-commerce companies like, Temu, they do this already in other countries. This is a model that kind of exists globally for e-commerce companies, but also in America, where there is this larger sort of secularized trend of gradual decoupling of China and the US. And so as we impose greater tariffs and controls and restrictions on China, what is it? Jurassic Park, life will find a way, right? Money's gonna find, capital will find a way, right? So like a fascinating bunch of shit going on, everything everywhere all at once in this story. Thought I should share it. Second item, second story news. You might have seen social media. There was a massive protest march on Wellington. As I'm recording this, it was, yesterday, but massive protest march in Wellington, New Zealand. It's called the Hikoi. It's a protest march that Maori have initiated every so often, very infrequently. This one was a massive one. So New Zealand is a country of 5 million people, not big. And they were expecting maybe like 10,000 people to take part in this march. And the Hikoi, it started at the top of the North Island, north of Auckland. And then it walked walked all the way down to the bottom of North Island to Wellington, right? And police estimated that the final crowd size in Wellington ended up being 47,000 people. That is fucking huge, dude. 47,000. So, I'm proud to have witnessed this. I wanted to share it in case for like context for people to know what's going on, but also like insofar as the world is a dumpster fire, this is a bright spot in it. You know, the reason I'm proud to have witnessed this is because I saw people power here in a moment when my like home country's politics have gotten so fucking dark and are about to get like way darker, way darker. We're going into the dark ages, bro. In that moment, the Hikoi is marching right down the road near my house on the way to Wellington. And it was an incredible sight to see. Maori flags, signs in Te Reo. It was multiracial, multi-class solidarity. Normal working class people woke up from normal ass lives to jointly say, this is who we are. Fuck the dumb shit. Let's go. And if you don't know why this is happening, New Zealand is run right now by a right-wing coalition government, and the condition for forming the government that's in charge right now was the center-right National Party making a concession to the far-right ACT Party that they table legislation that reinterprets the Treaty of Waitangi. And the Treaty of Waitangi, for people who don't know, it's basically like New Zealand's constitution. Like, it's a big deal. It's considered the founding document, right? And it's a document that establishes stable race relations, which is like really important, right? Maori and Pakeha white settlers can peacefully coexist under the Treaty of Waitangi. And that peaceful coexistence, though, depends on certain terms and understandings, including about the history here, colonial dispossession of Maori, right? Who were here first. And so opening up the treaty, which was not actually a good deal for Maori in the first place, is a way of erasing historical and structural inequalities that Maori face like historically and today, right? And it's a way of erasing that in favor of this kind of blank slate view of equality in the 2024. So functionally reinterpreting the treaty to deny Maori equal standing in society and equality in life chances, frankly, doing that while pretending that you're doing it in the name of a kind of libertarian equality is the move. That's what that's what David Seymour, that's what the current government allowed a vote on, right? And so the bill got voted down in Parliament and everybody knew it was going to get voted down, but you can't just like allow moves that are effectively like white nationalist policy moves, you can't just like let that shit slide. So yes, it was voted down, but you had to show force too. You had to show that you've got numbers. So the Hikoi is a protest of this kind of reactionary attempt to reinterpret the Treaty of Waitangi, right? It's this mass declaration that like, you will not change the foundation of this nation. You will not change us, you're not going to change who we are. You will not take away our fucking rights. Fuck you. And we're going to show out in numbers that ought to make your dick shrivel up, right? And that's what they did. And amazingly, it was joyous. It was peaceful. And it was several times larger than expected. And it was love. That was what one of my bros I trained jujitsu with. He was out there holding up the Maori flag for like 8 hours, and it was hot. It was sweaty, and he was putting in the work for the Hikoi, for peace. And he said to me at one point, like, he's like, this is what it's all about, bro. It's about love. And that is, I don't know, I feel like missing from a lot of American protest. It was something very hopeful in a dark world, and it was an example of culture as an on-ramp to human solidarity and to political consciousness for normal ass people. And the only time I've ever seen anything close to that is Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. And that was super fleeting, but it was amazing experience. I hope this kind of human solidarity lasts, not just in New Zealand, but like maybe proliferates, you know? All right. And then the big story right now, big story number 3. This is not getting enough attention. US missiles are now striking Russian territory as part of the war of attrition in Ukraine. Now, this could be the prelude to nuclear escalation. And that's like, I'm not fucking joking. Like, it really could be. It could be also handing Trump a fucking Nobel Peace Prize because there's a big risk that this causes an escalation from Putin that Putin then turns off as soon as Trump comes into power. So the New York Times reports that Biden just made this like major policy change. You could frame it as not a major policy change, but it is, right? So for several months, the U.S. has authorized Ukrainian operations against Russian territory, like just on the other side of the border, using short-range rockets called HIMARS, right? But until now, those kinds of operations were not allowed to use long-range U.S. weapons, right? You're not trying to strike deep inside Russian territory. What the you fucking suicidal, right? And so this is a big change. We've baby stepped our way to it, but these are also like bizarrely unhappy missile strikes in the sense that how could that be, right? In the sense that like the national security bros that I monitor from a distance on list serves and the like, they wanted Biden to authorize the use of ATACMS, Army Tactical Missile Systems, against Russian territory from the beginning. Okay, so this war has been going on since 2022, just as a reminder, right? But they've wanted ATACMS to be used against Russia kind of this whole time, partly because like they want to test Putin's mettle. They think he's a bitch. They think it's that classic Cold War shit. Like they only speak the language of force and like all that. So on those grounds, they think that they can just escalate with impunity. And so they thought they could use ATACMS and should use ATACMS. And now, well, they are, right? So from the national security bro perspective, this makes a certain kind of sense, you know, like their priority against Russia is to attrit the shit out of Russia. Their priority is counterforce, use the war to degrade, destroy, reduce Russia's ability to project power. And most Russian capability, incidentally, is not in Ukraine, it's in Russia. So on the one hand, they're happy about the new frontier where we launch missiles at Russia, you know. On the other hand, the NatSec bro comment that like I see repeatedly is something to the effect of like, this is too little too late. So like we're doing these kinds of operations only right now after the election, right? And Trump comes in January 20th. So if we're still doing operations that strike Russian territory on January 20th, Trump's just going to turn them off on January 21st, you know? And that what that means, big picture, is that like there's no prospect of these missile strikes having a serious strategic impact. They're not actually going to save Ukraine. And interestingly, I guess, you know, the national security bros are this is a kind of person, by the way, the national security bro. But anyway, they're worried that this looks nakedly political. And that's not crazy because it kind of is, you know, but like the idea is like now that Biden isn't going to be around to deal with the consequences, he's escalating as he's heading out the door and then handing the shit under the rock for the next guy to find. Right. And that's true enough, I suppose. But like the great stupidity here is that according to the New York Times piece on this whole fucking shit, the strategic rationale for these strikes against Russian territory is to hit North Korean forces. Okay. I mean, some Russian forces, I'm sure, but to hit North Korean forces, right? So in the piece says the point is to quote, send a message to the North Koreans that their forces are vulnerable and that they should not send more of them. And so that's the fucking stupid part. You know, for one thing, like North Korean forces are not making a difference in Ukraine. The balance of power was already overwhelmingly in favor of Russia, and we were just kind of helping hold things at bay, you know? But this is just like a coalition of the willing, right? The North Korean contribution is kind of like totemic, tokenistic, But another thing, like North Korea, this is a bad misread of North Korea. Like North Korea does not care about its troops in Ukraine. Like they're cannon fodder, really. It's probably cheaper for those troops, the KPA who deployed. From the Pyongyang perspective, it's probably cheaper that they don't come back, just being real. 3, the big thing that concerns me here is that Putin could just eat these strikes and bide his time because he knows Trump's about to be in office and this whole thing with Ukraine is going to get handled favorably for Russia, But Putin could also decide that this is the perfect time to act reckless. If ever there was a chance to use nukes and be sure that escalation was going to have like a time limit on it, January 20th, it's right now, man, because again, like Putin would know Trump's about to be in office. Any U.S. retaliation would have to be temporary. And so this is fucked. This is a very dangerous situation. It's like I said, it's not getting enough attention. But even if it were, U.S. foreign policy is so unaccountable that it kind of doesn't matter if we're playing with World War III. It doesn't matter if nukes are about to be used. There's no democratic way to intervene to stop it. The will of the people has no effect here. Foreign policy is insulated from accountability and from reason. The ruling class is going to do what the ruling class is going to do. And that means the die has already been cast. What's going to happen is already determined, and we as humans just don't know what that outcome is yet, and that sucks. So that's the dumpster fire for today. That's all I've got. Again, if you want to catch this kind of stuff on the off weeks for the podcast, as soon as it comes out, it'll be in the newsletter. If you're willing to wait a little while for it, then of course I'll put it in the podcast feed and you'll get it eventually. But all right, well, this was fun, or at least it's on the record if it's not fun. But either way, stay strong.